Hey everybody, this is part 8 of my 8-part video series, which means it's the final video. So if you've watched parts 1 through 7, basically I talked about, how you take off, how you land, why we crash, what it's like to fly multi-engines. But I didn't touch base on the person who has zero experience that wants to learn how to fly. And that's what part 8's about. So I'm going to dive into there's going to be 2 parts to this. There's going to be what I'm calling Learning to Fly RC 101 and then the more advanced 201. So let's get started. So first of all, when I learned to fly model airplanes, I learned to fly control line. Then I got into RC gliders and then got into RC powered planes. 40 years ago, when I was doing this, we had to build our airplanes. There were no ARFs, there were no foams, there was no ready to flies. We had to build our planes. So we knew much more about the plane mechanically. And today with ARFs and some of the foam planes that are ready to fly, basically you bind and fly or it comes with the radio, you're kind of on your own with understanding the parts of the airplane. So I want to touch base really quick. Know your radio. Know all your program mixes. Know all the trims. Know all the switches. Absolutely know the radio. Know the aircraft, which I mean the airframe. And I'm going back to when we used to build them. We knew about the hinges. We knew how the hinges were glued in. When you buy an ARF, if the flying surfaces are already installed, you really have no idea. So you do want to inspect that. You want to pull on the hinges. But you mechanically don't understand the airplane if you're a novice to radio control airplanes. Okay? How much the travel should be. That comes from a book that's with the airplane. You have no idea how to fuel or defuel your airplane because you're just getting into it. You need to understand all those systems. Same things with electrics. You need to know how to charge your batteries safely, buying a great charger, a balanced charger. But you also need to know how to put your batteries into storage so that they'll last hundreds of flights. So if you're wanting to get into RC right now, aircraft, fixed wing aircraft, it's actually the greatest time in all of history. Because when I learned to fly, there were no simulators, there were no buddy boxes. We just learned to fly. And I'm going to touch base on that in just a little bit. One thing that I've touched base in a few of my videos is ground school. And what I mean by ground school is today you can go to YouTube and learn everything about aviation, about full-scale airplanes, about model airplanes. You basically need to learn the fundamentals. If you are a novice that knows nothing about it, you need to understand the lift versus the weight, the thrust versus the drag. You need to understand that your power is your altitude and that your pitch is your airspeed. You need to really fundamentally spend a lot of time understanding how airplanes fly. You need to have a PhD in stalls. If you don't understand why an airplane stalls, you may get yourself into that corner of flying where there's no way out. Okay, on a full-scale airplane, if you're departing and your engine dies, if you don't immediately shove that control yoke or stick all the way forward to maintain your airspeed, to have enough airspeed to glide and land, you're going to get killed. Same thing with a model airplane. If you're taking off and that engine dies, you immediately have to get the nose down to retain any airspeed you have to try to create a flare. So you really need to understand the fundamentals, especially in stalls. You really need to understand every part of the airplane, like I touched upon just a minute ago. You need to understand your fuselage, the hard points of the wings where they connect, the hard points for the landing gears. You need to understand all of that. You really need to truly know if you've got glow, gas, electric, how all of that works. Okay? If you're a novice, I would really tell you to get a high wing airplane with a lot of dihedral and a fixed landing gear. Don't get a complex airplane yet. And what I mean by complex is using flaps, landing gears, all that kind of stuff. I mean, retract landing gears. Understand the control surfaces and what they really do. I saw a plane spin one time and it wouldn't recover the spin and it crashed. I'm like, what in the world? I've heard of people getting into spins they couldn't recover from. And normally they don't have enough rudder travel or the rudder's not big enough. This airplane only had like 5 degrees of rudder. They had set it up like in a trainer mode, which they did on their first trainer, but then when they got a Goldberg Chipmunk, They had only a little bit of rudder movement, and they had a very aft CG, and that plane wouldn't recover, and it crashed. Now, if you're a novice, you're going to end up in all kinds of fears. You're going to be, what if I crash my plane? That's a huge investment. You know, what if I tear it up landing it? What, you know, you're going to have all these fears. Now, if you get a high wing trainer with a lot of dihedral, and there's some pretty bulletproof ones nowadays that unless you pile drive it right into China, you can fix it and fly it again. Flight Test has a couple of trainers or a trainer type high wing plane that is really bulletproof. Okay, so you really need to understand, if you crash, normally you can rebuild your plane. But as a novice, why do we crash? Now, I did a video on why we crash, but I didn't do it on as a novice. As a novice, there's no reason to crash. Because with simulators today and buddy boxes, and I've almost even quit considering the buddy box. If you spend a good 20 or 30 hours on a simulator, understand the figure eights, understand flying the pattern, really truly fly all the different types of aircraft in a simulator, you can take a high dihedral, high wing, very light wing loaded, electric or glow plane and most likely fly it without damaging it. You might break the propeller, you might bend the landing gear, but I doubt you would destroy the plane. Another reason we crash is panicking as novices. Now, even people who, like me, who fly these airplanes, I've been flying for 40 years, we can panic. But what I try to get everybody to realize is fly your airplane all the way to the crash. So if you're a student and you get disoriented and your thumbs are going crazy, just try to hold your thumbs in one direction and see which way the plane's going. If it's curling this way, then you might let off the stick. If you're pushing the stick forward, it's doing this. You might do something opposite, but don't sit there and panic and just start shoving them around. Give them a second each time you move them to see what the plane's really doing. I test flew an airplane, the absolute lead sled of all existence. This should have been about a 28, 29 pounds Auroli. It weighed 42 pounds. It was a Corsair. I did something really stupid with it. I took it off, and I knew it was flying like a lead sled. And as soon as I got into the crosswind, for some reason I backed the power off a little bit. And I think it was like muscle memory. I'm always used to bring the power back on my airplane a little bit. Well, this airplane wouldn't fly except at full throttle. So when I brought the power back a little bit, I noticed the wings wobbled just for a minute, and then it rolled inverted on me. I mean, it stalled. The plane was really nose heavy, so I had a lot of up elevator in it too. So I got the plane in a corner that it did not want to fly. So it rolled inverted on me. I went to full power, and I actually, because I know how to fly inverted, I started flying the plane inverted out of the stall. And I got down to the trees and slowly got altitude, rolled it over, landed it. My knees were shaking really bad. And I told the guy I would never fly this airplane again unless you're going to put a monster-sized engine on it and get the CG right. But if you're going to panic, I hate to say this, panic all the way to the crash. Keep flying the airplane all the way to the crash. Don't just let go of the sticks and give up, ever. Another reason novices crash is you're trying too much too fast. And I'm not going to dive into the psychology of it, but full-scale pilots, we normally can get our pilot's license, well, I believe it's still at 40 hours, 20 dual, 20 solo, and you can go for your check ride. I had about 51 hours when I got my pilot's license, but I'd flown a ton with friends. So, and I'd been flying models. And believe me, if you're an RC, a really good RC pilot, you can absolutely get your private pilot's license because you already understand how everything works. But most full-scale pilots are most dangerous between that 50 and 125 to 150 hours. Because you got your pilot's license, you're able to take your friends, for a $100 hamburger, and if you don't know what that means, you fly to an airport that's got a restaurant at it or close, you buy the $20 hamburger, but you spend $100 in gas getting there, okay? But you feel like you don't need to keep practicing stalls. You feel like you don't need to keep, practicing crosswind landings. You get into this complacency between 50 and 150 hours. And with model airplanes, it's the same thing. I've seen people get 20 flights on a trainer when they really need 100 and move into a Warbird and crash it and then say, well, I hate the hobby. That was your problem. That wasn't any of the airplanes. You moved too fast into your next airplane. One of the things I've been asked is, how fast can I learn to fly a model airplane? In the old days, 40 years ago, I would say you need 50 to 60 flights in your airplane before you really start to master, the figure eights, good landings, good takeoffs, all of that. With simulators nowadays, you spend 30 or 40 hours in a simulator, you might spend 5 hours in the air with a trainer and pretty much already mastered flying. Now, you haven't mastered complex planes, you haven't mastered aerobatic airplanes, and you definitely you're not ready for a turbine, okay? And I should be careful saying that because there are some very light wing-loaded turbines that fly just like regular airplanes. But how fast you can learn also has things that has nothing to do with you. Do you have access to a sim? Do you have access to an instructor? Do you have a good flying field to fly at? Do you have a good place at your house to fly at? All of those will matter how fast you learn to fly. As I've said before, get into a high wing, high dihedral trainer airplane, very light wing load, tricycle landing gear. I would always say electric. If you aren't an electric person, go with glow. Okay. I don't know of any gas two-cycle engines that make up good trainers, and I might be wrong. Now I'm going to go into what I call, for novices, 201. Okay. And this is where you actually quit being a novice and become an accomplished RC pilot. Okay. Nothing will ever replace how much you get on the sticks. If you're flying in your backyard, or if you've got a club within 5 miles and you're flying every night for an hour, you're going to be a kick-ass pilot before you know it. If you're only flying once a week for 2 hours, it's going to take you longer. Disciplined flight will always teach you more than yanking banks. And what I mean by a disciplined flight is, we used to play some games when I would teach people how to fly. And what we would do is take off, fly a perfect rectangle pattern, then do a figure eight trying to use all the field. Then I would fly opposite the pattern, and then I would have them do one last figure eight, come around and land, and we'd try to do all that in a certain time frame. And the closest we came to being wheels down on the ground, we felt like we were accomplishing it. I think we had like 6 minutes for these flights. And it would depend on the size of your field, of course. But disciplined flight will always teach you a lot more than getting up there and yanking and banking. I saw a guy one time fly a third scale Ultimate with a big gas engine in it. He would go up, tumble it, do just some incredibly crazy flying, some of it dangerous. But when he'd land, he'd almost either come into the pits or roll across the runway into the wind into our fence. The guy didn't know how to land. And then when I watched him take off, he had so much power, he'd just aim a direction, roll 4 feet, and be airborne and go vertical. The guy could not land. So to me, he was a crap pilot. But he's flying a third scale Ultimate with a gas engine in it, and people watching him like, wow, those are great aerobatics. To me, there was nothing disciplined about that flying. And then if you really, truly want to get into warbirds or turbines one day, you need to master the rudder, you need to master slow flight, you need to master stalls, and do stalls where you're right side up, power on or power off. And if you got too much power, then do it like 33% power or 40%, and then try to get a power on stall. Do a power off stall, roll inverted. Learn how to fly inverted the pattern. Learn how to fly figure eights in the pattern. Master inverted flight. And then master inverted stalls. Start stalling your plane inverted. Some of the wings that are semi-symmetrical, when they stall inverted, you can get some really hairy, cool snap rolls. Master spins. Now, most airplanes that have enough rudder, you can recover from a spin pretty easy. Okay? Some full-scale airplanes that aren't rated for spins is because their rudders are so small. Okay? So they're afraid if a person gets into more than 2 or 3 turns, that they won't be able to recover because that rudder is just too small. RC airplanes normally have pretty big rudders unless it's a trainer. But master both inverted and right side up spins. Now some planes won't spin because they're so nose heavy. If you saw my one video on aircraft setup, I would say 60% of you would like to fly really nose heavy airplane, which creates all kinds of problematic parts of your flight regimen. But a plane won't spin if it's really nose heavy. I saw a guy one time say, hey, look at my spin, and he was basically doing a diving barrel roll. That plane wasn't stalled. The only way you can truly spin a plane is if the wing is stalled. And then master control of the airplane on the ground. Okay, that's my last thing I want to talk about here is master. I know this sounds crazy, but boy, you're an awesome pilot, but boy, you're crap when it comes to taking off toward you and almost hitting the pit. There will be times you show up to a fly-in, people taxi all the way to the end of the runway, they turn out, they come this way, they stop for a minute, yell, I'm taking off, and then they take off coming towards you. Now, I know some people have some ailments where either it's spatial disorientation or the way their eyes work that they have to stand behind a plane when it flies. I'm not talking about you people. I'm talking about the 99% of us that don't have any handicap on the way we see our planes fly. So learn to taxi down and take off coming towards you. Okay? I don't know how many people are good pilots but suck at maneuvering the plane on the ground. And I did a video about taking off and I cover this, but for you novices, learn, especially if you got a tricycle landing gear, learn how to control that airplane on the ground. And then move into a tail dragger. Once you've mastered a tail dragger on the ground, you're probably a kick-ass pilot. So that's it, everybody. That was all 8 of my videos. I am still going to continue with my other videos, but this was a video series that I had been asked to make where I broke down all the different regiments of flight. The next video I'm going to do is on flying biplanes. They are a little bit different than regular airplanes. Never flown a triplane, so that's something I've never done. So I'll see you next time. Everybody have an awesome day or night wherever it is, and rock on, and please learn to fly RC right now. It's one of the best things, the most enjoyable things you can learn to do. You feel like you've mastered something when you're really soloing, and when you start getting into warbirds or maybe even a turbine, you are going to feel like you are truly a kick-ass pilot. So rock on, everybody, and have an awesome night.